Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions. You can ask a question from your seat. We have the microphone that will pick up your voice. Who has the first question? We have one right here.
Thinking, the whole enjoyment of the fruits of your labor and wrestle with it. We had read something from John and Charles Wesley a while ago, and I don't remember which one it was, but he was saying that he had just purchased a picture for his wall and hung it up. And right after that, his servant came in, and with her tattered coat and whatever, and he just basically was sobbing as he reached into his pocket and realized that because he had just purchased this picture for his wall, he had no enough money to give to her. And he struggled with saying, at that point on, I did not indulge in anything that was for myself. And so I remember reading that thinking, I have tons of things hanging on my wall. I have tons, of things that I struggle. I was looking at, when you were preaching, thinking of Job and how blessed he was. And yet, the one thing that I noticed about Job, and I don't know, you can comment on this, is that he was so blessed that people saw his blessing and said, rocks were like butter and oil and all this other stuff. And, but he was this warrior. He was this warrior for the injustices in his community. So he was the one using his resources to take in the fatherless and the widow and provide, go to court for those, whatever. He was. So I almost see I don't know, just trying to reconcile it. And then you've got the rich young ruler who was willing to just walk away. He wasn't willing to walk away from his riches and give to the poor. God demanded of him, Jesus demanded of him to be, So anyway, I was just commenting. I'm wondering if you.
Let's talk about that briefly. The rich young ruler. I probably should address that sometime. I actually believe that what Christ was saying there was, you have under their system, they had to pay a poor tithe. They had to pay a poor tithe, and they actually had to every 3 years, I believe it was. Might have been every year, John. Maybe they had to put together a huge party, and they had to invite everyone, poor, everybody, partied together. And the best way I can put that together is that he never did pay his poor tithe that he should have paid, and because he wanted to keep it all for himself. I'm kind of opening up a can of worms there because a lot of people don't understand it that way. But forget about that can of worms I just opened up for a minute, if you can. But let's go back to what Job was. Job had, and when God restored him, you remember, he had twice as many camels. It was like, what is he doing with all these camels? And yet, I believe, I think it's chapters 31 and 33 of Job, I think, where he talks about what he had been like. And he talks about people that came to him for justice, and they got it. And all kinds of people that we'd want to ignore because they're not going to help us climb the social ladder. He was very interested in those people. And it looks to me like he was such a good administrator that it kind of looks like he had all day to dispense justice. I mean, he didn't. That's kind of like what it looks like to me. And so I think Job is the opposite of that guy we read about this morning. Riches give their owner. It's just all about his wealth. It seems like Job was all about using his wealth to serve Christ and serve his neighbor. And it seems to me that's the lens which we must look at this through ultimately. In the meantime, yes, let's be thankful to God for what he's given to us. Yes. At the same time, let's look to see how we can help others as well. And I'd be interested to know, we don't know the answer to that, but in the case that you brought up, in the Wesley case, he bought himself a picture. His servant comes in rags. If he would have given that money to this, let's say he gives the money to the servant, what does that servant actually do with the money? Does the servant go out and buy something or buy new clothes? You know what I'm saying? Buy new clothes, or what do they actually do? I think that question is harder to answer in our situation with our state-sponsored welfare than it was back then. Because back then you're going to have, you don't have anybody paying people to be poor. And here we do that. So back then he probably would buy themselves some new clothes. But when we have the poor in our culture today, I don't even know what the poor are. I truly don't. I mean, I saw people, when I was in the grocery business, I saw people come in that were officially poor, and they came in and drove in a car that I could never have afforded, but they were officially poor. So that's messing with us today, and it makes it harder. I think our state-sponsored welfare system makes it harder for us to really help our neighbors than what it really should be. I think it's really easier for Wesley to help his neighbor than it is for us. But yes, yeah.
With the John Wesley case, though,
Yeah.
isn't there also something to be said for the fact that by purchasing that painting, that artist got to eat dinner that night?
Yeah,
So
there is that.
in his
Yes.
case, it's almost which poor does he choose to help, or which person does he choose to help?
There is that. I don't know if you folks remember, about 8 or 10 years ago, New Jersey was going to stick it to the rich. And they put this huge tax on the yachts that were being made in New Jersey. Anybody remember that one? That was, I think it was about 8 or 10 years ago. And they were going to stick it to the rich people because they'd had enough. And everybody's all for it. So what do you think the rich people did? They priced the yachts out of existence. And so the rich people, one of the reasons why they're rich, they have resources, they went and bought their yachts from other state. They still have their yachts, but guess what happened? All the people in the yachting industry suddenly were out of a job. And it got so bad that even New Jersey, get this, they rescinded their stick it to the rich tax, and they got a yachting industry again, and guess what? People had jobs again. So those are points that all must be considered. All of it must. The thing that I love about Job, and if you get a chance to read, I believe that, I think it's 31 and 33. 29 does, but there's actually, he does like an autobiography thing. Yeah, he begins to answer him there, and begins to talk about what it was like as children, and what it was like, and when he existed in that society. And it's close to what I believe the Bible teaches what a real man is supposed to be of any passage in the Bible. And so what he did was he used what he had to serve his neighbor. And he served his neighbor even when he had half the goods, but when the end of the book, when he gets double what he had before, he probably served his neighbor just as much. And we can't sit around and say, well, bring the bureaucrats around. Oh, look at Job. He's got twice as many as he had before. He doesn't need them. I think we'll take them away. No, they were God's gifts, and I'm sure Job appreciated them. But if you want to read a real man, that Job passage, that's a good one. Who else has a question? And then, okay, John first and okay, Don first. Don first.
I wanted to make a comment from the hymn that we sung today, and can I say a little bit about the conference yesterday?
Yes.
Like just 3 minutes?
Yeah.
I was just really moved by this hymn that we sang this morning, Breathe on Me, Breath of God. If I could just read.
Sure.
Breathe on me, breath of God, fill me with life anew, that I might love what thou dost love, and do what thou wouldst do. Breathe on me, breath of God, until my heart is pure, until with thee I will one with you to do and to endure. Breathe on me, breath of God, till I am wholly thine, until this earthly part of me glows with thy fire divine. And I really want to thank Conrad and Abby for letting us know about that Reformation conference. It was really, really good, and yesterday was excellent. And there was just some literature about the godly home and family and this ministry, chapel library, their purpose, to humble the pride of man, to exalt the grace of God in salvation, and to promote real holiness in heart and life. And I just wanted to read maybe one page from this book. I've been really moved by God's heart for the family and God's heart for children and the desire that we abolish abortion. And as an engineer, I'm really challenged to find what are the root causes. And when you think about what causes someone to choose abortion, that's just a symptom. what's the behavior that then leads to that kind of irresponsible behavior? And I just want to say something about alcohol, because I guess it just kind of flows with all of this to me. And this is from a book by David Wilkerson, who was an amazing guy who did so much work with teens and inner city kids. Why do I speak out against drinking? Why such a sudden outcry? Because all this hue and cry for responsible drinking is coming mostly from Christians. This subtle attack on the moral standards of our youth cannot go unchallenged. We dare not sit idly while a small army of drinking Christians seduce this generation with a terrible lie that suggests responsible drinking is acceptable. There is no such thing as responsible drinking. It is always irresponsible and dangerous. What alarms me more than the fact that so many Christians drink nowadays is that they boast it can be done with an air of dignity and responsibility. An act that has for centuries led to alcoholism, poverty, and death is now dressed up and recommended as something responsible people do. In other words, there is a right and a wrong way to drink. They say it's not the alcohol that is wrong, it's just how you drink it. Drink it wrong, and you end up a drunkard in some filthy Skid Row. Drink it right, and you can go on forever sipping with responsibility. Consequently, we have thousands of sipping saints who have cuddled up with their cup, comfortable with the knowledge that they are among those who drink moderately and responsibly. I see in all these sipping saints a kind of condescending pride. I see it in the letter from the young would-be minister. I see it in letters received in my office daily from Christians who drink. They look down from their high place of responsible moderation on all those 6 million poor weaklings who are alcoholic prone. They seem to be saying, the stuff in my glass is different. My drink doesn't have the habituating power in it. I'm master over my glass. It will never hook me. It is almost as if they think Jesus turned their wine into water. Every time a Christian lifts the glass to his lips, he is saying, millions have been destroyed by this. The world is filled with the terror and destruction it has caused. Men die in the streets, held by its power. But it can never touch me. I'm too responsible. I'm too strong. I'm too much in control. Millions of others were weak and fell under its power. But me? Never. What pride, what arrogance, to set oneself above the human frailties of multiplied millions. The regular, moderate drinker is constantly kindling a small flame that can break forth at any time into a raging river of desire. The question that really hounds me is, at what point will the church condemn drinking? At what point does it become sinful for Christians to drink? Where is the line between responsible and irresponsible drinking? Does one first have to stagger down the street like a maniac? Is it between lightheadedness and silliness? Is it all right if it causes one to be talkative and loose, but wrong if it goes a step further and turns to violence and cursing? Is drinking good if it causes a depressed person to relax, but wrong if it causes him to gossip? Is it right or wrong only by the way a person reacts to its power? Can two men sit side by side, drinking the same amount of alcohol, react differently, and one be right and the other wrong? One man becomes happy and kind, the other mean and violent. Do we justify the kind drinker and condemn the violent one? Is a Christian justified in drinking to the point he is able to handle it with dignity? Does it suddenly become sinful at the point he makes a fool of himself? Is he a responsible drinker if he can hold down 3 or 4 cocktails, irresponsible if he vomits? Just one more paragraph. I walked into a Brooklyn hospital ward to a 15-year-old boy dying of alcohol poisoning. I see a lad going into a dark eternity, diseased, broken, and mindless. His eyes are sunken in their sockets, his cheeks are bony and hollow, his inner parts are in decay, his liver filled with corruption, his complexion is pallid, and his hair is matted. Victor started drinking cheap wine when he was less than 10 years old. By the time he was 14, he walked the streets of the Bowery like all the other burned-out alcoholics. He slept on the street, covered with newspapers for a blanket. Victor died in that overcrowded hospital without a friend to his name. He was just one of the many nameless young men and women who die of alcoholism in our big city hospital wards. But when I look into their dying faces, as I look with horror at the devastation caused by alcohol, as I pray over their emaciated bodies, something cries out in me. Oh God, your son Jesus could never have created a drink that does this to kids. Jesus could never have served a drink to his friends that can ruin people like this. Try it once. Go to any city morgue and look at the remains of teenagers who were killed in a car crash, a result of drunken driving. Witness those teenage bodies being laid out on slabs while weeping parents identify their remains. You too will get as angry as I do. You too will wonder how any God-loving, life-respecting Christian can even touch a drop of alcohol. How dare we identify Jesus and Paul with such destruction and horror? How dare Christians drink the same beverage that spreads death and terror across the nation?
Indeed. John? Oh, you had your hand raised. You don't need to comment on that, but yeah.
It seems to me that in Ecclesiastes, verse 19 of chapter 5, and then verse 2 of chapter 6, it seems that the gift isn't so much the gifts as it is the ability to enjoy.
Especially in item 6 too, I think.
Right, and so it would appear to me that the empowerment of enjoyment, Solomon is at least alluding to salvation. It reminded me of Paul's passage in Philippians.
Yeah, read that.
He talks, Philippians 4, beginning of chapter, verse 10. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble beings, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Was Paul enabled and empowered to say that prior to his conversion?
And the answer there is clearly no, because what he says earlier in Philippians, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it really appears that the great gift of being able to enjoy God and enjoy God's gifts are the salvation. They're essentially the same.
Yeah, that's a great connection, John, and it seems like Philippians itself would make that point, because he says earlier he says all these things that he was, Hebrew of the Hebrews, he had it, and he probably had wealth. You know, he doesn't say he had wealth, but he certainly had status, and he had honor. And he says, meant nothing, means nothing to him now. Now, with much less, he actually enjoys the gifts of God. Clearly there. So yeah, with salvation, I hadn't actually made the connection. I think it's a fair connection. Certainly that's an example that the difference was salvation for him, that he can enjoy God's gifts now that he couldn't enjoy before. Clearly. He was a bad guy, killing people. Yeah.
Would it be true then, I mean, that's something that we could be sanctified in? I mean, just like a lot of things in our Christian life, once we're saved, that wouldn't mean that we would automatically be given the ability to enjoy God's gifts. I mean, that would be something we can grow in over time.
Absolutely, Jeremiah. I think a classic example is children. You know, you become a believer, maybe your attitude toward your children doesn't change, but it must change, and understand they're gifts of God, and that is going to probably not going to be an instantaneous type of a thing. And what do you do with your goods? You know, that's probably not going to be instant. Can you be sanctified? Absolutely. I would argue that Solomon appears to become being sanctified with that as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes itself. It certainly seems to be somewhat of a process for him, no less for us. It seems. I saw another. Yeah.
So, chapter 6, first 2 verses.
Yeah.
There is an evil. And it goes on, and again, this is an evil affliction. But it's calling what God is giving someone evil, an evil affliction.
Yeah.
If Solomon is speaking truth, then we're calling what God's doing evil. Is that your understanding of that?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is Solomon's understanding of it, and I think he's using evil in the sense here of a tremendous frustration. I think vanity and the evil that he says is somewhat of an interchangeable thing. For example, throughout the book he'll say, there's an evil which I've seen. Then the end of it says, he opens it by saying, and he doesn't do it here, but he does in other places. He opens the topic by saying, there is an evil, and then he ends it by saying, this is vanity and grasping for the wind. And so I think he's somewhat using the terms synonymously, not in the same sense that we term evil like good versus evil necessarily. Later on in the book, he'll use a different word for evil. We'll see that later on in the book. He'll talk about evil, not in the sense that he's talking about it here, but the evil of wicked people, and it's a different word that he uses. We'll see that as we go further. Yes, and then Seth.
It's also as it's working out under the sun.
Yeah.
Not God's purposes, but how, God's not evil. He's not the author of evil.
Right.
But how's it working out under the sun? Here on earth, how
As he views it.
how are we viewing it at the moment?
Yeah. And I think I'd be a little bit in trouble with my explanation too if he didn't use another word, as we'll see later on, for evil. But he does use a different word. Yes?
Well, John covered most of my comment. I was just going to say that if you understand also that we're ascribing to the word evil as humans, we ascribe the idea of ill intent against somebody unrighteously. The issue is that God can use an evil or a calamity, a massive earthquake, a tornado, a hurricane, a typhoon, whatever. God can use that great calamity or great evil upon a people, and his intents are righteous. So, anything that God afflicts anyone with is not unjust. That's the issue. As Joel's already covered, nobody deserves anything from God except judgment. That is the only thing that we actually do deserve from God. So, I think that's how we also need to understand, is our understanding as humans of the idea of evil is, at least in the Western vocabulary, is ill intent against somebody unrighteously, which I think this is God's righteous judgment on some people.
Yeah, I can't find it. I believe it's in Amos, where God says, is there evil in the land and I haven't done it? And I believe that's in Amos. I couldn't find it this quickly. I know it's kind of terrifying to see me open the Bible during the question and answer time. You think you're in a second sermon. That is how I believe it's used, where God says, is there evil in the land and I haven't done it? And what he really means there is calamity, right there. It doesn't mean in the moral sense of good and evil. And I think that's another term for that. All right, well, I thank you for your kind attention and good questions today.